Welcome to your Get That Nugget for GCSE English Language. Today we'll be concentrating on giving you a framework to answer Paper 2, Question 3, the language question. This session is to complement your lessons with your teachers and not to replace them in any way. We're just going to revisit the aims of Question 3. This is what our examiner is looking for us to do. We need to explain the effects of writer's choice of language, and we need to be able to identify using subject terminology. Remember, subject terminology just enhances our answer, and the effects are what we're being asked to do. In the previous nugget for this question, we looked at the question from the paper Discoveries, and we were looking at how the writer uses language to convey his excitement at his discovery. Remember, we're only using one source for this, and we went through how that process should look. We had a 3-step process of approaching this question. Once you've done this prep work, writing the answer is a lot easier. This, I would say, I would spend probably, at least if not more, half of your time for this question on the planning. You've got about 15 minutes to get those 12 marks. So I would definitely spend a good 7-8 minutes planning, because then all you've got to do is turn your plan and your annotations into sentences. This can be the thing that is a bit of a blocker for students, but hopefully in this nugget today, I will show you an easy way of structuring those paragraphs. As I said in the previous nugget, this is very similar to Paper 1, Question 2. The skills are the same, but we are looking for 12 marks in this question. So we're going to write in a more detailed way, and we're also looking at a bigger surface of the text. So you're going to be wanting to write more than the 3 paragraphs that I recommended for Paper 1. We're going to start by looking at an example paragraph. So it's important to remember that we've done all the prep work. So we are just literally turning this into sentences. So if we take the rhetorical questions, we've said it's rhetorical questions. We said that it showed that he was looking forward to it, that he was excitable, that he was eager and surprised to see more. So we're taking that and turning it into a paragraph. Now, the process that we used last time, if you remember, is we need to make a point. Then we have our example, which is our quote. Then we're going to explain, and we explain how our quote supports our point. Then we're going to pick a word out or a phrase, because we want to really drill down into that analysis. And then we look at the effects of this before linking it back to the text question. Now, as I said in the Paper 1 Question 2 video, for some people it might be a good place to start to do the first 3 rather than all 6. But this is something you can build up to and practice on anyway. We will look at both versions. So this is our example paragraph. What I'm going to do is label each section so it's really clear to you where we have used parts of those skills. So our first thing, if you remember from before, we need to link to the question. So our point has to link. So here is our point here. The writer shows excitement for his discovery by using a range of language features. So I've used the word from the question in my point. I've made it really clear to an examiner. I know what I'm looking for. This is what I've got to say, and they will understand that you understand. I have then also identified what's been used. So just before my quote, I've identified and used some subject terminology. So I've said that it's rhetorical questions, which is great. Then I've got my quote, as you can see here. Nice and easy. Again, I wouldn't make the quotes very long. You don't want to be spending your time copying loads and loads of lines out. Try and keep them shorter as possible within reason, because obviously you need to then write about them later. And then I've got my explain. So the use of rhetorical questions, or maybe a chamber, shows the writer is surprised and eager to discover more. So I have explained how my quote shows my point. I've said that he's showing excitement I've then given some evidence for that, but I need to explain how that shows excitement, which is what I've done here in my explain. I then go on to explain it a little bit more. The repeated use of rhetorical questions suggests that excitement is building, creating suspense for the reader as we go on the journey with the writer. So a little bit more explained there. Again, I've referenced and identified the technique. And I've also talked about the fact that they've used more than one. So in the text, they do use more than one rhetorical question. Again, I've linked it back to the question. Excitement is also in there. Ideally, you would start to change the words, and you don't want to repeat yourself and keep repeating the word from the question. But for a first paragraph, it's really clear to see that I am answering that question. And then finally, I'm picking a word out. So I've picked the word maybe, shows that he is unsure of what he will see, yet the excitement to find out is certain. So nice and easy. I've picked a word out, I've got my effects, and I've linked several times to the question. Ideally, you'd close on a sentence to link straight back, but obviously I've repeated myself already twice. So using this process, I have done a successful paragraph. It's not very long, it's not very detailed, but I have done the basics of an analytical paragraph for my response. If I had 4 of these, I would be able to get the marks that I deserve for this question. What you should do is just keep remembering this process. This is the important process here. It might not be some of the words you might not use from there. It might sound like a completely different person to you or how you write. But if you use this process, you will do well with this question. Remember what I said, if you are unsure about how to use analytical paragraphs or how to write them, and you'd like to start off with the first 3 things, that's fine. You need a point that links to the question. Use the words of the question. Keep it simple. Make a point. Then you use a quote, and then you're just explaining how that quote supports that point. If you're telling me that he's surprised, and that shows excitement, then explain how your quote that you've selected shows that. Link everything back. What I would recommend is you do then start to progress onto the rest of this list. Picking a word or phrase out shows that you can do your language analysis really well. Pick out the word and think about why that word has been chosen. What effects does that word have or that phrase have? Writers use things for a reason. They want to create effects. It's your job as a reader to try and write what those effects might be. The linking back to the question, again, quite important because you want to show that you are answering that question. With this question, I think it's quite easy to make sure you're doing that because you're going to keep using the same sort of words anyway. And you may find that when you've linked it, you've actually linked it up here anyway within your effects. That's fine, it doesn't have to be a separate sentence. Sometimes it already comes into the effects. That's up to you and the way that you write. But this process for every paragraph is what I recommend. So forget what I've said, what I've written there. All you need to do is you take your notes from your annotations and then remember this process. You're going to make a point, link it to the question, use the words. You're going to find a quote. You've already found a quote, so take the quote out and then explain it. Most of that will be in your annotations anyway. This is where we start to push ourselves a little bit more, and it's very easily done, just takes a little bit of practice. Pick the word or phrase from the quote that you've already used in that paragraph and start writing about the effects of the use of that word or phrase. It doesn't matter which word or phrase it is that you pick from that quote, as long as you can write about the effects, that's completely up to you. If you find by the end of the effects that you've not quite mentioned or quite got back to the question, then you just put a closing sentence to link back to that question. Remember, you would have already highlighted within the question what the key words are. So that's a good reminder for you to keep using that word into your answer or an alternative that means the same thing. This is important, and if you can get this done for this question, that means you will also be able to do it for paper 1, question 2. This is a good process to go through. It's a good base to work from. I'm going to leave you with the question 2 3 from the paper that you've been able to download. In the last nugget, I asked you to plan the response. In this nugget, I'm going to ask you to write the response. Remember, you already have done all the prep work for it. So all you're doing now is you're just using this process for this question. So take your notes and you're going to use this 6 steps 3 times. That gives you 3 paragraphs. Even 1 paragraph, you will be able to see the process and then you'll be confident enough to do the further 2 paragraphs. That will give you a full answer to give to your teacher, who'd be really pleased to mark it for you.